4 p.m., you might be a tailgater. If every time you laugh, you now sound like the real Joe, you might be a tailgater. If you don't like Fridays because Tall Tales is not on during the weekend, you might be a tailgater.
Tune in to Tall Tales with me, Bob Klitzkie, Monday through Friday at 4 p.m., only on 93.3 FM. And you, too, can become a tailgater.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The Taliban's in full control. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The U.S. says its military mission in Afghanistan is over. The last U.S. troops and the U.S. ambassador left Monday to end America's longest war, which started after the 9/11 attacks in 2001. The U.S. says at least 100 Americans who wanted to leave were unable to get on those last flights. Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
Of those who self-identified as Americans in Afghanistan who are considering leaving the country, we've thus far received confirmation that about 6,000 have been evacuated or otherwise departed.
The administration claims it will likely continue facilitating, quote, overland routes.
Fox's Kevin Cork. The U.S. left more than people behind. It also left U.S. military contract working dogs to the fate of the Taliban. A group called American Humane is condemning the Biden administration, saying the dogs were left to die at the hands of American enemies. The storm formerly known as Hurricane Ida is pushing through Mississippi as a tropical depression and expected to bring heavy rain and flooding across parts of the Tennessee and Ohio Valley overnight and into Tuesday.
The slow-moving storm is still causing flooding throughout the region, and tornadoes remain a threat. President Biden, meeting virtually with governors and the FEMA administrator, noted that more than 5,000 guardsmen have been called up, generators are being sent, even drones are being used to assess damage to the power grid.
Fox's Mike Tobin in New Orleans. The storm wrecked parts of New Orleans, killed at least 2 people, and left hundreds of thousands without power. Ida also hammered a large portion of U.S. oil and gas production as it roared through the Gulf of Mexico, and that is likely to push gasoline prices higher in the coming days. America's listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Illinois Democrats are expected to approve new legislative boundaries Tuesday. Republicans and some community groups complain Democrats rushed the process to stay in power. The European Union removes the U.S. from its safe travel list over concerns about rising COVID cases.
The decision means American tourists, particularly those who haven't been vaccinated, are likely to face tighter controls, like tests and quarantine orders. But the EU's guidance is not binding. Countries can choose to ignore it and keep their borders open. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
Another drugstore wants to be your therapist.
CVS is joining Walgreens and Walmart in expanding in-person counseling at or near stores. CVS started a pilot program this year at 13 locations. It saw a surprisingly high return rate for customers who had an initial consultation. It's now expanding to 34 locations. An area designated for medical services inside stores includes a private room for counseling sessions. Jenny Cosola, Fox News.
And comedian Jon Stewart returns to the small screen with a new show on Apple's streaming service.
Apple TV Plus announcing September 30th as the premiere date for The Problem with Jon Stewart. It's the first series for the former Daily Show host since he departed Comedy Central in 2015. In a trailer, the comedian comments negatively on how he looks, saying,
"Why would I go back to a visual medium? I could have done a podcast." Look out!
The trailer ends with the words, "and there will also be a podcast." Monica DeLuca, Fox News.
And I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Starting August 1st, pandemic unemployment assistance claimants must start searching for work to remain eligible for PUA benefits. 3 work searches a week are required. Work searches include registering on HireGuam.com, meeting with employers, submitting resumes and applications, and attending job fairs. Only a few are exempt from the work search requirement. This includes those working reduced hours, those in training programs, and self-employed individuals. Remember, PUA ends September the 4th. Now is the time. Let's rebuild our workforce. For more information, go to dol.guam.gov.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What a wonderful way to start a radio program, Jose.
I concur.
Yeah, I think we'll just keep doing this from now until, I don't know, eternity's a long time, but we'll keep doing it for a while.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's turn now to Demi Ikotny. One thing I gotta say for the Daily News, they're consistent. They get in a groove, and they'll stay there no matter what's going on. One wonders if it was Kaleo Moylan that bought the Daily News or Pfizer, because the Daily News seems to be the Westpac distributor for any kind of vaccine. Here's what they're saying today. Since before Wuhan virus had a name, which was a little over 18 months ago, we've been using every means possible to stay ahead of the virus. We've consistently fallen short. When novel Wuhan virus was first identified, we used thermal scanners to detect fevers, although we knew at the time that fever detection was not an accurate measure of whether someone was infected. But it was the best we had at the time. And besides that, sometimes it's better to do something even if it's wrong, right, Jose? We used masks and social distancing to prevent the spread of the virus, and we used lockdowns to prevent people from gathering. And we used roadblocks on Marine Corps Drive to keep people from going places. We knew that despite these measures, there would still be transmission. at least in the cars that were stopped at the roadblocks. It was the best we could do at the time. When we got tests, we started using them to screen and quarantine people. Although we knew that people could have the virus before they tested positive, it was our best measure at the time. Finally, we got vaccines. From the beginning, I'm going to translate that into tall tales. Not from the beginning, from the get-go. I learned that one from Steve, the chief of police. From the get-go, we knew that no vaccine would be 100% effective in preventing the spread of the virus. And we knew that if we didn't have enough people vaccinated, the virus possibly could mutate and variants could develop. Vaccines were the best weapon we had against the virus at the time. Armed with vaccines and anxious to return to a pre-Wuhan virus way of life, many communities tossed aside their masks and resumed indoor gatherings at full capacity. Now, with record numbers of cases and infections landing even the vaccinated in hospitals and cemeteries, we need to once again figure out the best way to fight this virus. As Governor Lou Leon Guerrero said in a recent address, this isn't the same virus we were fighting in 2019 and 2020. The new variants are more contagious and possibly more dangerous. Still, our best weapon remains vaccines, masking, social distancing, and highway checkpoints. We need to learn to treat everyone we encounter as though they're infected with Wuhan virus. Because no matter what the thermometer says, no matter what the test says, no matter what the vaccine card says, some of them are infected with Wuhan virus. They walk amongst us. It sounds like somebody who wants to be a writer for a science fiction movie. We need to continue to practice social distancing, and we need to keep up the hygiene practices, hand washing and sanitizing. And yes, we need to keep wearing masks. And yes, we need to stop having any fun, no matter how tempting it could be. These measures aren't perfect, and we know they won't prevent anyone from getting sick, but they are the best tools we have right now. We need to take responsibility and use every weapon we can to protect ourselves, our families, and our communities. Yeah, well, you just get one editorial and change the date on it. Use your search and replace feature and go through and change happy to glad every time it appears. And you pretty well got your editorials down pat. Here's what the Post has to say. Jobless benefits end in a few days. Many could fall off a financial cliff. For the past year and a half, Guam's unemployed and underemployed workers did not have to go penniless, even when the Wuhan virus pandemic cost them their jobs or reduced their paid hours, or they didn't work for the government of Guam. The federal government provided Guam with nearly $1 billion budget to provide cash assistance to more than 20,000 Guam workers. As of August 17, $784 million in unemployment benefits has been paid out. The cash assistance will end in just a matter of days. The week of September 4 is the last week for which unemployment benefits can be claimed for those who still qualify. The federally funded unemployment benefits kept many Guam households from falling off a financial cliff in this pandemic. Over the next several months to more than a year, we won't see funding sources for financial aid for thousands of Guam households that come anywhere close to the federal government's help. So what's the plan to help a vast majority of households in our community who still go from receiving weekly unemployment benefits to substantially less cash for necessities? We know that the host of Tall Tales, Bob Klitzkie, has a really great plan that sounds an awful lot like FDR revisited, and we really ought to give it a try. There are efforts to provide certain forms of safety net, but the sheer number of households that will shift from receiving unemployment benefits to getting zero assistance will be a challenge that our local government and our community should have come better prepared for months ago. There are efforts to provide some help, but the level of preparation does not match the sheer magnitude of the need and the need for massive, well-sustained efforts. One of the programs in the planning stages is a payroll subsidy program for employers. The idea is to help employers hire or keep workers through a government subsidy on the part of the employer's payroll costs. The plan is to provide qualified employers up to 3 months of wage subsidy at the rate of $9.50 an hour. In prior government statements, we were told the plan is to employ or reemploy some 5,000 workers by paying for all or a portion of their hourly pay up to 480 hours or 3 months. The cost of the program would be $22 million. That program was crafted when there was hope that the tourism industry would immediately rebound. Now tourism's recovery is not anywhere near the horizon, and restaurants and other hospitality businesses are struggling for survival, challenged by new limits to how many customers can patronize establishments. The impact of $22 million in payroll subsidy will be a drop in the bucket compared to $784 million that supported Guam households for the past year and a half. There's a $30 million economic relief program called All Rise, but that one-time payment of $800 or less for each individual who qualifies will not go a long way to sustain a household. GovGuam had probably nearly $600 million in federal funds remaining based on a tally a few weeks back. But major chunks of that money will not go directly toward helping the unemployed. About half of the $600 million is being contemplated on a $1 billion plan to build a new Guam Memorial Hospital, public health and social service facilities, and a mental health facility all in one compound. There have got to be more discussions in the legislature and the governor's complex, or at the governor's private beach in Inarahan, if we want to have a closed-door meeting, about the nearly 20,000 Guamanians and their households who are about to see financial hardships get even tougher. The Department of Labor is trying its best to encourage people to find out about apprenticeships and job skills training opportunities. But these are often unpaid and not going to supplant the jobless benefits that will soon go away. While this issue is no doubt a big deal, it has not been at the top of the agenda for those who have the power to move mountains for families of the unemployed. Yeah, well, the the Post, I think, nailed it. So once again, this is the second time in 2 days, I believe, the coveted Blue Star will be awarded to the Guam Daily Post. I can hear the champagne corks popping in the editorial boardroom all the way up here in Tamuning. Okay, I've got somebody in the green room trying to get on the phone with me. That would be Mike Rudolph, who wants to talk about the Bob and Ray resolution, a subject dear to my heart. Yeah, good afternoon, Mike. You picked a really good subject to talk about. Tell me more.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me on. Is the sound clear enough?
Sure. I can hear you 5 by 5.
All right, great. So first, thanks for having me on. And I was wondering if, two things. If one, you could provide me with a copy of the resolution so I could help circulate it. And two, something I'd like to share, and then maybe you can expound upon the importance of the resolution. So I really feel that we've reached a precipice. The executive orders have now impacted me in a very personal way that is both threatening and dangerous. Threatening in the sense that if another executive order is passed, maybe this time all businesses must require vaccination of their employees, and maybe another one, all adults to be jabbed. And who knows, maybe the governor would even try to usurp a parent's rights over their children to get them vaccinated too. There seems to be no end in sight, and that is a threat to my livelihood.
You're describing what we call a slippery slope there, Mike.
Yeah, it is. It is. But there's still it's challenging my...
Oh, we lost him. Mike, we just lost you, so call back. I got another caller, and and as soon as you call back, I'll get you back online. Okay, so I got Martinez, Karen Martinez online. Good afternoon, Martinez. You want to talk about the amendment to today's budget? Martinez. Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Just be a little patient with me, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, it is, after all, my show. Okay, you want to talk about an amendment to today's budget to end mandatory vaccinations, right?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
Then after I make my comment, I want to ask you a question, because when we talk about the legislature, you're a former two-time senator, okay? So you're okay? The comment is this. There's a bill in the legislature, Democrats stalled it, that would require the legislature to vote whenever the governor has mandates like on vaccination. There's a second part to the bill that requires the legislature to vote whether the governor is going to make citations if they don't follow her mandate. Now, when they do the votes, and it could be 8 votes because that's a majority, they could do 2/3, 8, 9, 10, or they could do 9 as a compromise. But Senator Mary Camacho Torres, a Republican, is the one that come up and blocked it. And she said, well, we should have a public hearing. Well, number one, this is similar to Bill 11 that already had a public hearing. Number two, you know this more than most people being a senator, that there's a lot of riders, which are amendments to budget bills, because the only things you can do riders to that don't have public hearings. And number three is the time thing. Now, my question to you, Senator, since I know you guys call it caucus, but Republicans will say conference. In the states, what they would do, Senator, is they would primary her. But you can't primary her because on Guam you vote for 15, not 1. What do you think the Republican caucus should do about it? And what do you think the Republican Party should do about her? For not just taking the sides that they took a vote on his amendment to the budget that would have done this, every Democrat and one Republican supported it. So all this stuff of her playing Democrat, blocking, what do you think the caucus should do? And what do you think the party should do?
Well, the caucus, once upon a time, you'll recall I talked about this on the show, really dissed her publicly when they left her out of one of their discussions, and Tello made a point that she wasn't part of the decision. So the available remedies to the caucus are, one, they could introduce a resolution to expel her. The legislature has the ability to expel a member. Now, the chances of that going anywhere are somewhere between not even slim and none. But it is an alternative. The second thing they could do is publicly say, we're not caucusing with Mary Torres anymore, if they ever were, that is, of course. But when you come right down to it, there isn't a whole lot that the caucus can do to someone who's as agogot as Mary is. Mary has kind of presented herself as a Republican, but if you scratch the surface, things like her second chances law and some of the other stuff, so a lot of the legislation she introduces is actually more Democrat than Republican. So, so I think there isn't a whole lot that the caucus could do except, take some public stand that would tend to make her to insult her, but even that has its risks because he might just develop sympathy for her, or she might have a certain appeal for those people who reach across the aisle.
Wait, can I ask you, can the caucus pass a resolution expelling her from the caucus?
They can introduce a resolution. They can't pass it. They can introduce it.
I'm talking about just from the caucus, not from the legislature. Can the Republican caucus pass a resolution or a motion to say this member is excluded for these reasons?
From the caucus?
Yes.
Certainly.
Okay, that's one thing. The other thing, Senator, the last thing, what do you think the Republican Party should do about it?
Well, once again, I would have to look at the bylaws of the party, but I suspect that the bylaws would contain a clause that would allow for her to be expelled from the party.
Okay. Or since next year's a governor's year, not only are we going to have mass meetings, we're going to have pocket meetings. They could exclude her from that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, now let me finish it. It's a shame. Because her father, as you know, was the last appointed Republican governor of Guam, the first elected governor and Republican governor of Guam. Her brother is a former two-time Republican governor. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think her and her brother are the only two brother-sisters that have been members of the legislature, going on since 1970, because you know I'm an expert from 1979. And I think before 1970, which means since her father was a member of the legislature, we got two things. They're the only brother, sister, and they're Republicans, members of the legislature, and is the only father, daughter, son members. So she has all of that. She's just ruining her family's great Republican name. That's all, Senator. Thank you, Senator.
Okay, well, thanks for calling, Martinez.
Yes, Senator.
Okay, so back to Mike Rudolph. Mike, we lost you somehow.
Hey, thanks. Sorry about that.
Yeah, okay.
So, what I wanted to continue on was, I think it's important if you can explain the what the resolution will do and how it'll help us. Yesterday, I had something very personal happen. My oldest son, got ready for school. He's kind of on autopilot in the mornings, and my wife had to remind him that the governor canceled school, and he completely deflated, and he got angry. And all this forced social atrophy on our kids, what kind of adults are they going to turn into? How is their adulthood being shorted because of how school has been suspended essentially for them? They're not getting the education they need. And all this just really needs to end. And I would like it for you to be able to expand on the resolution for the audience and maybe help convince other people that they need to contact senators to introduce that resolution.
Okay, well, if you were to look at 10 GCA Chapter 19, Section 405, I think it is the section of law that gives the governor the ability to declare these emergencies. And it gives her the ability to declare an emergency for 30 days. And at the end of the 30 days, she can continue to renew it ad infinitum, which obviously is what she's shooting for. But that same section says that a majority of the members of the legislature can end the emergency and that she can't renew it again. That's what the resolution says. It was enacted way back in like 2003 or 4 when a group put together a model emergency statute. It was after 9/11, and there was a lot of interest in those things. So what we did was we took the model act and Guamized it, and that's where that provision came from. So if the law were to be followed and that resolution were introduced and a majority of the members voted for it, that would end the current executive order, and it would say that she can't enact anymore, she can't declare another emergency for the same reason. Um, obviously, we're dealing with some people who I thought in the beginning we were dealing with some people who didn't even understand it. We had a call from Tello Taitagui. She was on the phone with Ray, and I butted in, and we must have spent 20 minutes with her telling her how it worked. And she had comments like, well, the governor would never sign that. The governor doesn't sign resolutions, Senator. Yeah. So, and I have beaten this drum many times on the air, that even just introducing it, even looking for co-sponsors would send a message, because right now the governor is, I think, being lulled into the sense that nobody cares at the legislature, and she can get away with anything. She could keep doing this till the end of her term. So, it
seems like all of them have been, Governor, may I do this? Governor, may I do that?
Yeah.
And it feels like they've forgotten what power they actually have.
Yeah, and if they're that forgetful, then there's nothing to forget, because they don't really have any power. The way the senators exercise their powers is with the bills that they introduce, and in this particular case, the resolution, not by writing letters to the governor that she universally ignores if Jim Moylan happens to be listening.
Yeah, we know what bin that goes in.
So I'd be glad to send you the Bob and Ray resolution, Mike. We'll have Jose put you on hold. He can get your email address, and I'll get it off to you in the morning. Would that work for you?
That'd be great. Thank you very much, sir.
Good talking to you, Mike. Good luck with that project.
All right, thank you.
You got it? Did you hang up?
Call back again, Mike. We'll get you.
Yeah, Mike, you got to call back so we get your email address.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Chili's is pairing up premium entrees with 2-in-1 entree selections starting at $19.99. Indulge in mouth-watering combos like the sirloin and ribs combo, the ribeye and jalapeno sausage combo, or the savory sirloin and ancho salmon combo. All served with delicious mashed potatoes. Dine in today and enjoy the best of both worlds flavor experience with Chili's 2-in-1 entree selections. Available for a limited time. Chili's on the second floor of the Tumont Sands Plaza. Chili's, savor the moment.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we go. I got a really thin card today, so such discipline as I exercise to hold people to the card will be somewhat lessened today, because I'm probably going to have a hard time filling the time frame with what I've got. I've only got one local item, and here's what I've got. I've got courage versus timidity, which is kind of a nice bookend for Mike Rudolph's call. I've got doctors versus the science, Gramsci versus lawyers, and some holdover stuff from before. So let's start out with courage versus timidity. You've heard this before. Good leadership values someone brave enough to offer a contrarian view. This was the Post editorial. And it is kind of a report on the activities of Dr. Hua Gwen. So when Gwen, in the confusing and somewhat chaotic days of the Wuhan virus pandemic in early 2020, was tapped to join the governor's physicians advisory group which is made up of volunteer doctors. It was reassuring to see that Gwen was part of that, as well as other doctors in his league. He became the chairman. Now, a year and a half into the pandemic, Gwen is out. He confirmed with the Post that he's no longer an officially seated member of the group, but he does plan to be in touch with the group members. The straws that broke Gwen's resolve to remain part of the governor's advisory group were the two recent decisions by the governor to, one, effectively ban the unvaccinated from places such as restaurants and gyms. Two, essentially require employees in the hotel and restaurant industry to get vaccinated against Wuhan virus. It's understandable that Governor Leon Guerrero wanted to nip this new surge of Wuhan virus and infections in the bud. Gwen is of the view that the way to control the spread is to reduce the size of social gatherings rather than ban an entire segment of people and essentially force people to get inoculated even when they have qualms about their body's ability to take the immunization. Here's a quote from Gwen. "I can tolerate a lot of mistakes and a lot of things, but one thing I can't tolerate is taking freedom. I'm a refugee and I left my country. I served in the U.S. Air Force for 24 years. Remember that. He was an officer in the Air Force, a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. People die for our freedom. The approach of mandatory vaccination, segregated vaccinated and unvaccinated, to me, is totally wrong. People live in a free country." So he was a very loyal member of the Physicians Advisory Group, a lot of credibility, and he hung it up. He hung it up and he went public, and he told everybody why he hung it up. That's why the title of this item on the card is Courage and Timidity. Now, we had somebody who made a real significant sacrifice here on a national scene that showed a great deal of courage. And it goes like this. The U.S. Marine relieved of his command for calling out his superiors over the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal that led to the deaths of 13 service members said Sunday he was officially resigning. This is something I got off Fox News. Needless to say. You won't find stuff like this in the New York Times. In a tell-all video posted on social media, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller acknowledged he was sacrificing a comfortable retirement by criticizing the way the withdrawal was handled. "I could stay in the Marine Corps for another 3 years, but I don't think that's the path I'm on. I'm resigning my commission as a United States Marine, effective now," Scheller said. "I'm forfeiting retirements, all entitlements. I don't want a single dollar. I don't want any money from the VA. I don't want any VA benefits, even though I'm sure I'm entitled to 100%. Scheller ignited a firestorm of controversy Thursday for posting a less than 5-minute video in which he went after top military brass for not taking responsibility over an ISIS attack in Afghanistan that resulted in the deaths of 11 Marines, a soldier, and a corpsman, and 169 Afghans. I'm not saying we need to be in Afghanistan forever, but I am saying, did any of you throw your rank on the table and say, hey, it's a bad idea to evacuate Bagram Airfield, a strategic airport, airbase, before we evacuate everyone? Did anyone do that? And when you didn't think to do that, did anyone raise their hand and say, we completely messed up? Speaking to the pushback he received from that video, Scheller said, all he was asking was for accountability of my senior leaders when there are clear and obvious mistakes that were made. I'm not saying we can take back what was done. All I asked for was accountability for people to comment on what I said. I think accountability would do more for service members with PSD and struggling with a purpose than any other transparent piece of paper or message. And I haven't received that. Going on, I don't need a single dollar. He reiterated that he was forfeiting a potentially $2 million pension fund for the rest of his life by going through with his actions, but warned that going after stability and money makes one a slave to the system. 36, what's it called, Jose?
The legislature.
Yeah. Depending on the money, he warned that going after stability and money makes one a slave to the system and makes you compromise on your principles. I don't need a single dollar. I just need every single person that's willing to go back outside the wire every single day to wear a blue collar and just go into work every single day and feed their families. Those are the people I need. Follow me and we'll bring the whole system down. I am honorable, and you can ask any Marine who served with me for 17 years. I dare you to ask them all and find out what I'm made of. We're just getting started. So, courage versus timidity, right? Dr. Ho Quinn, he compare and contrast him with the folks over at the Guam legislature who literally won't even pick up the Bob and Ray resolution, would not be caught dead with it on their desks. Don't even want to take the time to understand what's going on.
What if the governor Atambabas me?
Exactly. Yeah. I see the governor a lot, and she'll know it's me. And I don't want to get the Atambaba every time I go to the store. So, that kind of courage, the kind of courage that Dr. Gwynn exhibited is a rare thing. And it's an oversimplification, but I'm going to say it anyhow. It's the reason that we have some of the problems we have right now. That the governor has come up with some real crackpot ideas, and apparently no one who has her here has had the intestinal fortitude to stand up and say, Governor, let's think this over a little bit. There are other ways of doing this. Look at this cluster fumble that she's created with this whole $30 million All Rise program. Confused everybody by tying it loosely to the All Rise Act, loosely by using the same criteria, 40,000 or 80,000. And then creating her own program where she had tremendous flexibility, much more flexibility than the legislature had. And now she's created a situation by saying, by not signing the bill into law, because she wanted to give the money to government employees who had no hardship whatsoever. No government of Guam employee missed a payday and missed a nickel's worth of pay. A lot of them got to stay home. So she's now created this All Rise program, and there's a form that you fill out, and one of the qualifications on that form is that you had to have had a financial hardship caused by the pandemic. So it works like this. Do you have a financial hardship created by the pandemic? Yes or no? You got to mark yes. You don't have to explain what it was. Nothing. Just say, yeah, I had, and I went through some ridiculous extremes yesterday. I suspect our creative callers could come up with some others. And then because, in the beginning, Raging Lee's bill, which had the RISE acronym in it, her bill was set at $30 million. And the governor herself said that Raging jumped through the hoops to find out if that would be enough. And the governor said, that's why I chose that amount, $30 million. But then she adds several thousand government employees to it, and it's not going to be enough. So her way of dealing with that is to say, first come, first served. So because it's first come, first served, and the only way that a person can apply for it is either online or to go to RevTax. There's no drop box. You can't turn it into your village mayor. You actually have to go to RevTax, and they're going to open at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning.
So I just thought of another reason for the checkbox.
Uh-huh.
I have to fill out for the All Rise because I was infected by COVID by standing in line to get the All Rise.
Good, Jose. Yeah. So the story going around now is that some people are going to camp out overnight at RevTax so they can be first in line, because they know if they're not, if they don't get to the front of the line, the chances are they're not going to get any money. And we all know that there are a lot of people on this island who lost their jobs, who are really up against it, who, if they got to spend the whole night in line down at RevTax, would probably do it. There had to have been an easier way of going about doing this than that. But I sometimes detect an element of perversity in our governor. If someone were to say, Governor, I could think of an easier way to do this. And what would the governor's response would be? Off with his head. We don't want to make things easy. So yesterday I was critical because there are no qualifications for it. You could have made $39,999 during the pandemic, spent a lot of time at home watching TV, and you could still qualify it because all you got to do is mark yes on that form. But then the governor throws in this endurance test to see who has enough endurance to weather it out. It just doesn't make any sense at all the way she's going about doing this. So doctors, as you were, courage versus timidity. Yeah, I'm going to come back to courage versus timidity, but I've got somebody in the green room here. Yeah, another Tim is in the green room on this disgraceful government. Go for it, another Tim.
Well, Bob, I was chiming in on your comments about Lieutenant Colonel Nugent and Lieutenant Colonel Smith. And I just simply wanted to say there's a creed that the Marine Corps shouts from the rooftops, a creed that defies our enemies and defines the tenacity of the Marine Corps. And it's a very simple motto: death before dishonor. And I cannot think of a more dishonoring situation than what the United States is facing and what our military has been put into, not only with the disgrace that the government has put upon our allies, but also with the idiocy in decision-making that goes from the Wuhan virus all the way to international relations. It is disgraceful It's despicable, and it really does call for action by everybody at every level, including facing the governor with this totalitarian type of actually she's not even intelligent enough to make her own decisions. She's following the decisions that are made by California and Hawaii, and it's kind of like, oh, if they're doing it, then I'm going to do it too. And it's really does not fit, especially the conditions that we're living in. And that's what I wanted to say, Bob.
Well, you said a mouthful, another Tim. And I've seen that tattooed on guys' arms, death before dishonor.
Well, it means a lot. It means
does.
that we would rather have our heads taken off before bowing down before our enemy.
Yeah, well, it's a very good description, Tim. Another Tim. So I want to thank you for calling in. I got to take a short break, but glad you're a tailgater, buddy.
Thank you, Bob. You take care.
All right.
Hafade, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahasi.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Okay, so here we go again. Nate horns in and shares his hardship caused by the pandemic that he could use if he were applying for the All Rise program. Nate says, my Rolex store was closed, so I had to order it online, and the shipping was more expensive. That counts, right? Yeah. He had to pay to have his watch shipped instead of just picking it up at his Rolex shipped instead of just picking it up at the store.
He didn't know what time it was.
Financial hardship, if there ever were one. And then I saw Jose Ted Pajago's back. Let me see here. Yeah, Jose Ted Pajago Jr. Jeff Deist has a very good commentary on the silver lining of COVID on Mises Media. And if you're not reading Mises, M-I-S-E-S, Ludwig von Mises was a famous Austrian economist, and he has a column that's worth reading every day. And one of his columnists, a guy named Jeff Deist, who's a lawyer, but don't hold that against him. They write some really good columns. It's a great place for a conservative. Yeah. So I'm glad you're with us, Jose. I thought for a minute there I was the only tailgater that was reading Mises, but I'm glad to find out that that's not correct. And let's see, Jose goes on to say, it's Jose Ted Pajago Jr., so it's that cancel culture or woke BS here in Guam politics? I don't know. Just started follow the politics on Guam, busy with our zombie President Biden. Yeah, I don't know if I'd call him a zombie or not. I don't think he has that level of awareness. Let's see. Yeah, here's an interesting one from Ellen Leon Guerrero. Throw a bone in a pit with a bunch of starving animals. What do you think happens? Fight, peasant fight. Fight, peasants fight. Who wants it more? And it's kind of like we were talking before the show. It seems that the governor has a penchant for dividing the folks of Guam. In case, help me with this, Jose, but one of the things that she did was she sent, what's his first name, Tony Babauta, to the United Nations to lay out this pro-Chamorro rant, having the effect of separating Chamorros from all of the other ethnicities that live on this island, just like the other separatists, like Bavacqua, et cetera. But she had her own in-house separatists go to the United Nations. And then with the whole rise, whether you want to call it act or program, once again, she sided with government employees, sided with them against everybody else on Guam, who are much more numerous. And there was another one that you brought up, Jose.
The vaccinated versus the non-vaccinated.
That's right. Attempting to drive a wedge in the population because some people are vaccinated and some are not, bad-mouthing those that aren't, making their lives as miserable as possible. So most people, when they run for governor, whether they want to do it or not, will say, elect me your governor because I want to bring us all together. And they make vague reference to the spirit of Inafa Maldeg and, we've a one Guam approach to things, et cetera. But this governor, it seems like, when we had Mike Rudolph online, he said these kids are just not getting their education. And I agree with him 100%. They're probably going to be the biggest losers out of this, of everybody that lives on the island. But I sometimes wonder when it comes to people if the governor flunked math because she can't seem to count above 2.
She learned to divide.
Yeah, she forgot about addition, right?
Straight to division.
Yeah, it's kind of like the guys that took flying lessons and didn't want to know how to land the plane. Yeah. Okay. So moving on with the car. Well, yeah, just a little bit more on courage and timidity. So far, the only courage that I've seen recently is Frank Blas. Frank Blas went down to that rally across the street from the ITC. He spoke up. He was on the record. And he voiced strong opposition to the governor. Jim Moyland perhaps has been one of the more popular folks at the post office.
He writes prose.
Yeah, because if Jim Moylan is in office, he wouldn't even think about laying off any mailman. He just floods the mail with letters to the governor, which he universally ignores.
Maybe he has a supply of forever stamps.
Maybe. And then when the All Rise Act the Bob and Ray resolution was distributed to the Republicans, everybody spoke up, but Jim, he didn't even comment on it. He didn't even come out and he didn't even pull a tello, for crying out loud. So the only courage that I've seen so far is Frank Blas, and of course I got to credit Chris Duenas, who introduced Bill 11.
Oh, let's not forget the speaker and Talena Nelson for voting against the party.
Yeah,
on Bill 11 and the override.
That's true. Talena, the speaker, Chris Duenas, and Frank Blas are the only ones that seem to be courageous. The others seem to have terminal timidity. So as long as that's the situation, then we're really stuck with a one-branch government. We don't have 3 branches, we've got 1. Okay, let's break for the big halftime show. We'll come back to doctors versus the science.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The war is over. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. For the first time in 20 years, no American troops woke up in Afghanistan.
A new chapter of America's engagement with Afghanistan has begun. It's one in which we will lead with our diplomacy.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken says U.S. diplomats posted to Afghanistan will work from Qatar.
We will continue our relentless efforts to help Americans, foreign nationals, and Afghans leave Afghanistan if they choose.
Blinken says fewer than 200 and likely closer to 100 Americans remain in Afghanistan who want to leave. He says the U.S. will hold the Taliban to its pledge to allow people to freely leave the country.
Fox's Jared Halpern. Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw of Texas is upset the U.S. left Americans behind and tells Fox News.
One of the most infuriating things we saw this week was Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying, you know, we're going to get Americans out. We're going to use our leverage. Well, what leverage? I mean, we barely had any leverage when we had 5,000 troops there these last couple of weeks in Kabul airport. What leverage do we have now?
Ida weakens into a tropical depression after slamming into southern Louisiana Sunday as one of the most powerful storms ever to hit that area. It caused massive flooding and cut power to more than 1 million homes, businesses, and government services.
Our ability to fight fires is at issue here, and the need for community just to have clean drinking water, which is an essential for the most basic of a community.
Jefferson Parish President Cynthia Lee Shing. The storm left at least 2 dead and is now taking aim for the Tennessee Valley. The Caldor fire in California forces thousands to evacuate as it burns closer to South Lake Tahoe. America's listening to Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Nearly 260,000 more people contracted COVID in the U.S. yesterday. And in Georgia, state health officials say half of the state's recent COVID outbreaks can be traced to schools.
Governor Kemp said he's prepared to call in as many as 2,500 Georgia National Guard troops to combat the surge in COVID-19 as ICU beds across the state are about 90% full. Hospitals are saying they need all of the help they can get. The state had more than 12,000 new infections, which is worse than we were earlier on in the pandemic. Some hospitals are also saying they're running low on oxygen supplies. The executive order Governor Kemp signed would make it easier for trucks carrying oxygen to get it delivered to these hospitals that need it the most.
Rob Dorenzo with Fox 5 Atlanta. A 15-year-old student faces an attempted murder charge after a shooting at a high school in Wilmington, North Carolina. Deputies say the teen shot another student after the two got into a fight. The injured student is hospitalized and expected to be okay. Celebrities take to social media to pay tribute to Ed Asner, who died over the weekend.
Asner, best known for playing Lou Grant on The Mary Tyler Moore Show, was also the former president of the Screen Actors Guild. He was a prominent figure in the acting community. Ben Stiller wrote, sending love to the great Ed Asner's family, an icon because he was such a beautiful, funny, and totally honest actor. No one like him. And Sean Astin wrote, what a life. Colleague of my dad, shepherded my mom into the union presidency, whooped me at poker, fought against wars and lies, fought a lifetime for our union, and stood up to it just the same.
Fox's Michelle Polino. And lightning strikes at a New Jersey beach Monday, killing a young lifeguard and injuring 7 other people. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Starting August 1st, pandemic unemployment assistance claimants must start searching for work to remain eligible for PUA benefits. 3 work searches a week are required. Work searches include registering on HireGuam.com, meeting with employers, submitting resumes and applications, and attending job fairs. Only a few are exempt from the work search requirement. This includes those working reduced hours, those in training programs, and self-employed individuals. Remember, PUA ends September the 4th. Now is the time. Let's rebuild our workforce. For more information, go to dol.guam.gov.
Pastrami is back at Subway. Pepper-crusted beef layered with crispy pickles, mustard, and melted provolone cheese. Nothing comes close to the pleasure of sinking your teeth into that chewy, juicy, well-seasoned pastrami. It's happiness in a sub. Head down to the nearest Subway restaurant and satisfy your craving for the deli perfection that is pastrami. Subway. Eat fresh. Pastrami sub is available at all Subway locations on Guam and Saipan, including NCS, for a limited time only.
Well, another great halftime show here on Tall Tales. Next is Doctors versus the Science. And this is an article by a guy named John Morosky that ran a website called Broad and Liberty. And he says medicine is getting major injections of woke ideology. That's great news. The national racial reckoning over reparations and critical race theory is taking over the world of medicine and health care. Prestigious medical journals, top medical schools, and elite medical centers are adopting the language of social justice activism and vowing to confront systemic racism, dismantle structural violence, and disrupt white supremacy in their institutional cultures. Some activist physicians describe the present-day healthcare system with such ominous terms as a medical caste system or medical apartheid, the latter locution taken from the title of a 2007 book about America's history of medical experimentation on enslaved blacks and freedmen. Quote, modern American medicine has historical roots in scientific racism and eugenics movements, according to a February article in the New England Journal of Medicine. I got to stop here. This is scary, because the New England Journal of Medicine is extremely highly rated and well thought of, seen as one of the really go-to places for information about medicine and health. And if they fall into it, we really got a problem. So the February article was titled, "How Structural Racism Works, Racist Policies as a Root Cause of U.S. Racial Health Inequity." Quote, "Black communities became medical training grounds and a source of profit, reinforcing the American medical caste system that we have today. Rare is the doctor who's willing to publicly question claims of white privilege and implicit bias in the healthcare system, and already several doctors who have publicly pushed back have been demoted and have filed legal actions alleging retaliation. This year, the medical profession received an unequivocal message when two editors of the prestigious Journal of American Medical Association resigned under pressure over a podcast that aired opinions expressing skepticism that the United States is plagued by systemic racism." You're not supposed to say that. If someone says the United States suffers from systemic racism, the only decisions you are to make is, are you going to say "oorah" or "hooah" or "yeah, right on," if you want to go back to the 70s. You're not supposed to say "that's not so" or "I disagree." Yeah, if you know what's good for you. While racialized politics has infused every corner of American life, the moral stakes in the healthcare arena go far beyond, say, the perceived slights called microaggressions. The medical literature, lately drawing on critical race theory, depicts the healthcare industry itself as a historical source of illness and an even killing of black and brown bodies. That would make medicine analogous to policing and criminal justice, the other social institutions directly blamed for maiming and murdering black people. During the last year, more than 200 governmental bodies and private institutions have declared racism a, quote, public health care crisis, a step that potentially clears the way for taking more aggressive action to protecting public health by hiring more black doctors, academics, administrators, and editors as caretakers and gatekeepers. Quote, "If for no other reason than atonement, addressing racial equity is a just cause for academic medicine," Clyde Yancey, Chief of Cardiology and Vice Dean for Diversity and Inclusion, Vice Dean for Diversity and Inclusion at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine, wrote last year in the Journal of the American Medical Association, usually referred to as JAMA, J-A-M-A, JAMA, in a piece titled "Academic Medicine and Black Lives Matter." I wonder if Tom Shea is a member of the American Medical Association. He seems to fit right in here, doesn't he? What exists today is the infrastructure for scientific discovery and medicine reflects structural racism that has evolved from a biased, stained, and oppressive history against black individuals, Yancey wrote. All physicians, and particularly those in academic medicine, can and should address racial equality and engage with Black Lives Matter because atonement matters. So I don't know what they're how they would engage with Black Lives Matter. Give them a lifetime supply of matches? Wow. The movement is just beginning to reshape the practice of medicine, but a primary assumption is that white doctors and institutions are pervaded with unconscious bias, and that black doctors, who are significantly underrepresented in the profession, would provide better care to black patients. But because black students typically get lower scores and lower grades, increasing the ranks of African American and other minority practitioners would likely require moving away other minority practitioners. Let's tell Thomas Shea that, huh? Yeah. Yeah, and you know, the reason I have this on my head, some of the people that I know thought that I was trying to have a horn implant. And if this one worked, then I have problems with, talking about racism. A white man living in the tropics has got to be really careful of the sun. I'm finding out. Right?
All lives matter.
Yeah. So I've been going to Dr. Yang, for treatment of these various kinds of skin cancers that I come down with. And I wonder if he knows that the medical profession is so racist. And the dentist that is working on my implants, Dr. Hayashi, I wonder if she's aware of this. It's just, you can't make this stuff up. You start out with a premise that's dead wrong. If you start out with a premise that 2 + 2 = 5, you can multiply and you can come up with some really strange answers, all of which work if 2 and 2 = 5. If you factor them back to their basic premise, they all are correct. But if the basic premise is wrong, then they're all wrong. And that's this whole Black Lives Matter thing. The basic premise is just dead wrong. America is not systemically racist. Now, the guy over there in the lazy boy recliner is saying, "Yeah, well, what about Jim Crow? And what about slavery? Everything and those kinds of things." Well, if you really think about it and study it, when the American Constitution was drafted, we had an irreconcilable conflict. We had slave states, slave colonies, and free colonies, and it was bad. And the way that the colonies got into it wasn't any grand plan. They kind of backed into it accidentally. And they probably could have backed out of it had it not been for a guy named Eli Whitney, who invented a machine called a cotton gin. And the cotton gin separates the seeds in a cotton boll from the cotton, making it much easier to turn the cotton into yarn. And cotton became extremely profitable. And cotton is a labor-intensive crop. I have, when I was a youngster, we used to drive through the South, and you could see people crawling through the cotton fields, pulling these bags that were maybe 6 or 7 feet long, plucking the cotton, sticking it in that bag. No fun at all, it would make planting rice look like a playground game. So in order to handle this labor-intensive crop, the institution of slavery was greatly expanded in the cotton states, the southern part of the Confederacy. And a lot of other things happened. And people don't like to let go of something that can make them rich. And that's kind of where we were when the Constitution was drafted. But the Constitution, in its in a way that doesn't jump out and grab you by the eyeballs. But if you study it, you can see the Constitution provided the means for ending slavery way back in 1787, which was forward thinking for the day. Nobody else was thinking about ending slavery at that time. And the mechanisms that they put in place actually worked. So we actually got rid of slavery. It took a war to do it, but we got rid of slavery. And because the Democrats, Solid South, didn't want to get rid of slavery, they did the best thing they could do to hang on to it without calling it slavery. Things like, prison labor.
Indentured servitude?
Well, indentured servitude came before that.
Oh, that's right. The
Irish. Irish and Brits. And I pointed out on this show that in 1619, the 20 African Americans that came to what became Virginia came as indentured servants. And when their indenture was up, they actually became freedmen. But the folks that wrote 1619 don't want to hear that. So in order to break the Democrat South, and if you study this, the Democrats started moving that direction, and the Solid South, under the leadership of senator whose name, of course, escapes me for the moment, at the 1948 Democrat National Convention started a rump group called Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond headed up a rump group called the Dixiecrats. And the Dixiecrats didn't want anything at all that even closely resembled civil rights in the Democrat Party platform. And it took Republicans in the Senate and the House in the 1965 to finally pass the kind of legislation, the Voting Rights Act and other things, that finally put an end to Jim Crow. And we've made tremendous progress since 1965 that the Black Lives Matter folks don't want to talk about. They want to talk about ancient history, pretend that it happened just yesterday, judge everything that happened back during those days with today's manners and morals, and then say, the system is oppressive, and the reason it's oppressive is because of white supremacy. The white supremacists oppress people of color. And until we junk that, until we come up with a new system, it's never going to change. So I want to go on with this article, but maybe I can get some help here from whoever it is in the green room. Who else but R. Carl, the most dangerous man in the room? Yeah, give me a hand here, R. Carl.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. Good afternoon, Jose, and everybody. Yeah, I just wanted to add a few comments about this issue of slavery. That's actually one of the main reasons why I started reading Thomas Sowell's writings much more, because I want, we were being told a lot about slavery, but I wanted to know, what the facts are. And Thomas Sowell, his books are very well, has got extensive note sections. They're very well sourced, and I trust what he says. So anyway, one of the things that is, there's a great book, it's one of his popular bestsellers, called Black Rednecks and White Liberals, and I bought it specifically for one chapter, which is titled The Real History of Slavery. And in it, that's the first time I saw someone explain or read someone explain that slavery was actually a fact of life around the world for thousands of years. It was practiced at one time or another on every inhabited continent on the face of the earth. Blacks enslaved blacks. The Europeans did not go into Africa, the African continent, to capture slaves. because the survival time for a white to go into Africa was under a year if he went into the interior, because of, there were illness, there were diseases there that their immune systems weren't used to, and it could kill you. So these intertribal warfare would happen, and the victorious tribes would keep some of the captured tribal members for their own use, and the rest of them they would walk to the coastal slave markets and sell them off to Muslims, primarily Muslims, and to Europeans, and of course in the colonies later on. And so one thing also that many people aren't aware of is that there's this idea that slavery is incredibly profitable, but actually the northern industrial part of the United States, which was tended to be anti-slavery, was the economic powerhouse of America, and the Black South was not really comparatively not that economically strong. Also, another thing many people aren't aware of is that, and this is from one of Thomas Sowell's books, The Economics and Politics of Race. And there's a section here about Brazil, and it says Brazil imported more than 6 times as many African slaves as the United States, although the surviving slave population was greater in the United States. Slave population of Brazil never reproduced like that of the United States, but was constantly replenished by new slaves from Africa. And one other interesting thing here, the massive importation of Africans to Brazil was facilitated by its geographic proximity to Africa, but it was necessitated by a loss of slaves due to high mortality rate under the brutal conditions of Brazilian slavery. Slum slaves were literally whipped to death or thrown into pools of piranhas or boiled in oil. So anyway, those are just some little facts that we're not aware of. Brazil is not exactly an economic powerhouse today, despite the fact they brought in 6 times more slaves than the United States did. So I just wanted to provide some perspective and contrast on the issue of slavery. A lot of people aren't aware of how pervasive it was for many, many centuries, thousands of years down through history. And Africa just happened to be the last victim, because a lot of places eventually became nation states, and they could punish people who, as they got militaries, they could punish people who came and raided their coastal villages for slaves. Africa, unfortunately, was very divided into thousands of tribes, and it wasn't united until much later on. So it wasn't that they were black. The reason they were enslaved, it's because they were available, and they were, they were comparatively easier to victimize. So anyway, just some random thoughts on that. I hope that adds something to the conversation.
Yeah, it sure does, our Carl. Thank you very much for sharing with us.
All right. Talk to you later.
Okay, and then we've got R. James, who wants to talk about slavery and segregation. Go ahead, R. James.
After rainy afternoon, Bob.
Sure.
Just a quick fact that nobody conveniently wants to admit, that goes right along with, the comments that he just made. The original first facilitating, and the quote, or the name of a cracker, okay, was not a white, quote unquote, American from the 13 colonies standing over the slaves, cracking a whip, shouting orders. The original facilitating crackers were the Africans themselves, Spanish or Spanish Portuguese, okay, or sometimes, in many cases, as he mentioned, the Muslims and in some cases, the Dutch slave traders. Okay, the original cracker was not some guy from the 13 colonies standing over a bunch of slaves. It was the other countries who facilitated it and very much fought to try to keep it going. So but nobody wants to admit that that's what the real history, the beginnings, and the furthering of slavery came from. They just want to immediately blame it on white people. Okay, well, that's my comment for the day, Bob, and you have a good one.
Well, I sure appreciate your call, R. James. You're one of the tailgaters that we always look forward to hearing from, so thanks again.
You bet.
Okay, and then I also got Dr. Ron McNinch. Ron will head for Wrigley Field, and we'll catch you on the way out of the ballpark.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Here at Guam Auto Spot, we have the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars. Like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage. As low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore. As low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
So here we are in Wrigley Field, Chicago, the world's most beautiful park. And as I'm exiting the park, I run into none other than Dr. Ron McNinch. Good morning or good afternoon, Ron.
Hey, happy day, Senator. Happy day, Guam. Yeah, very interesting topic today. I'm kind of, one quick point I wanted to raise is there's a concept in the U.S. Constitution, and for want of another way of saying it, there's different ways of saying it, but it's an aspect of corruption of blood, meaning that we're not to be held accountable for the sins of our relatives. So if we had relatives who've done bad things or whatever, there's no way that a person who's simply a family member of that person should be penalized. It seems that many of the people who want to make these arguments about systemic racism seem to want to claim that because my relative was a person who lived in the U.S. in the 1800s, I must be in some way accountable for things that someone might have done. I don't know any other, and I don't mean to sound that negatively. When I grew up in the South, I went to the first grade in Georgia. We had African American teachers who are wonderful. It was really neat to have a variety of teachers. I was among the first desegregated classes in my school, and it was really a nice variety, a nice difference. I learned things from my African American teachers that I probably wouldn't have learned otherwise, because their styles were different, their ways of motivating and interacting with students were different. And to me, that was real diversity. It showed me how other people think and feel. And that was a celebration of diversity in many ways. But I feel as if we've lost that sense of celebration of our differences, that our differences are to be points of contention and negative in all ways possible. And I have a problem with that. I don't think that it's healthy for anyone. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Well, and let's talk a minute about corruption of the blood. What we're talking about here is Article 3, which is the article on judiciary. Article 3, Section 3, second paragraph, which says, Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. So what corruption of blood, you kind of put your finger on it. If Aaron Burr is accused of treason, then if we're talking corruption of the blood, then Aaron Burr's offspring are also guilty of treason and on down the line. So in the Constitution, that concept is limited just to treason. However, it establishes a good policy hook that we should all pay attention to, that there shouldn't be any corruption of the blood in anything that happens in the United States. The fact that your parents were bad people doesn't mean that you're bad people. In fact, that's kind of one of the bedrocks of the American system, that people are not limited by what their parents did or didn't do. That up until now, everybody had the sense that I have a really good shot of being better off than my parents. Not anymore.
Right. Yes. And, I think that we have so many good potentials. Guam, we have a 42% interracial marriage rate on Guam, one of the highest in the United States. Everyone has relatives from all kinds of races and cultures and ethnicities. I think that we largely live in harmony here, and we're kind of proud of our relatives that are from a different race or culture. I think we celebrate it. We don't disparage it. I don't know. I just hope we can have a grander community discussion along those lines at some point.
Well, it seems to me from all the reading I do that we're blessed, that we have escaped most of the nonsense that seems to have a good chance of taking over the 50 states. From everything that I read, the only people that kind of stepped out of line were, as far as I'm concerned, Tom Shea and what's her name, Mariana Leon Guerrero, when they went down to Skinner Plaza and with this white coats for Black Lives Matter thing. But other than that, it seems like we're still pretty much on an even keel here, Ron.
Right, and there's one other little point about Black Lives Matter, and I hope at some point there will be a deep discussion nationally about it. It's a corporation. It's not really even a social movement. It's a for-profit, but they've got money going into them that goes somewhere. And that's one of the big conundrums about that organization, is that they're a brand and they enforce their brand power, so to speak.
Well, at least the part that Patrice Cullors is connected with is more than a brand. It's a scam. We know that $3 million of the money that went into their treasury went to her real estate investments, and she's living really well now on the contributions that people made for what they thought was an ideological movement.
Right. Well, great show today, sir, and keep up the good work.
Good talking to you, Ron. So I'm going to go back to this article here. All physicians, this is a statement that we're having to live with in the medical profession from the American Medical Association. All physicians, and particularly those in academic medicine, can and should address racial equality and engage with Black Lives Matter because atonement matters. Atonement meaning, gosh, I'm sorry what I did to you. Yeah. The movement is just beginning to reshape the practice of medicine, but a primary assumption is that white doctors and institutions are pervaded with unconscious bias, and that black doctors who are significantly underrepresented in the profession would provide better care to black patients. But because black students typically get lower scores and lower grades, increasing the ranks of African American and other minority practitioners would likely require moving away from a reliance on conventional measures of academic qualification, such as undergraduate grades and standardized test scores. Scrape the paint and varnish off this. What these folks are saying is we got to let more dumb people into medical school. That's basically what they're saying. But if they're dumb and black, it's okay. If they're dumb and white, no, then they can't come in. But in order to achieve this Black Lives Matter end of systemic racism, and we know exactly what it means. It's diversity, equality, equity, and inclusion. So it's not that that every person who wants to go to medical school should have an equal shot of it, regardless of whether he's black or white or whatever. That's not the way it's done. That's not equity. Equity means that if there are 15% of the population is black, then 15% of those admitted to medical school must be black. If for whatever reason they can't pass academic muster, we scrape that aside in order to provide equity to people of color. That's what this is all about. So if you have to go, and sooner or later everybody has to go to the doctor for something really serious. You go to a doctor for something really serious, surgery, whatever. Don't waste any time doing research on the doctor to find out what his qualifications are. That would be a blind alley. What you should do is to find out if the place where the doctor works practices inclusion, equity, and what's the other one? Inclusion, equity, and diversity. So if you went to a place like Cedars-Sinai in L.A., which, by the way, was started by people of the Jewish persuasion. That's where the Sinai comes from, Cedars of Lebanon, Mount Sinai. If 15% of the doctors at Cedars are not black, don't go there. And go over to go to Watts, where you'd probably be able to find a clinic where everybody's black, and that's where you should go. Now, whether or not the people that you're going to be seeing are fully qualified should not enter your mind at all. That is not important anymore.
Seems like kind of a conundrum here.
Yeah.
Because now are we to identify their race like on their, what is that called, the resume or the CV or something like that?
Absolutely.
That would be racist.
It would. But Ibrahim X. Kendi will tell you that the way to end racism is to have more racism, built around equity and inclusion.
Do you ever see that interview where someone asked Morgan Freeman, how do you end racism? Stop talking about it.
Yeah, stop talking about it, right. So that's the game, that because there aren't enough black people in particular positions, the reason is that because they can't pass the standardized test. So there would be two different approaches. Work with people to help them get to the point where they can pass the standardized tests, or do away with the standardized tests. And I've talked about racism myself here. I'll tell you, systemic racism, the National Basketball Association. 70% of the players in the National Basketball Association, well, actually, this is not the association, it's the country. The United States is systemically racist, and that's why 70% of NBA ball players are black. And the reason is that the society is so racist that there's no other way that those black basketball players could make millions of dollars every year in salary, product endorsement, etc., just for playing a game. That's how racist the United States is. So they're forced into professional basketball because it's the only way they can become millionaires. But it doesn't count. It doesn't work that way, does it? Okay, so going back to this article here that I'm reading, according to this reasoning, grades and scores may not be a reliable measure of future potential for underrepresented minority groups because such students must first overcome an array of obstacles and challenges, from biased teachers to unprepared parents. Unprepared parents. How unfair. To catch up to their more privileged white classmates, according to a piece written by a trio of black physicians in the New England Journal of Medicine last year. Ultimately, physicians' skill and quality are defined by the care they provide to patients over the span of a career, a value that no three-digit test score can anticipate. The New England Journal piece states. Okay, we got to head for Churchill Downs. We're getting close to the home stretch here on Tall Tales. Let's head for Churchill Downs, Jose.
Hafaday, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahasi.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Yeah, so here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, heading down the home stretch for Tall Tales on this Tuesday afternoon. And our Keith called up to help me get down that home stretch. So thanks for your help.
Explain. Hello?
Go ahead, our Keith.
Hi, Bob. So, if we're so terrible as a predominantly white nation, how does one explain the success, the unquestionable success of East Asians, Japanese, Vietnamese, Chinese, South Koreans?
Yeah, because our racism is selective, apparently, right? And how does one explain the fact that of all people that are descendants from Africa, the African Americans in the United States are more prosperous than any place else on the planet? How does one explain that?
Very good question. I'm always amazed when this silly excuse has been going on since before I was born. And I'm always amazed how you turn to the Cubans or the Vietnamese boat people who literally, not as a quaint expression, but literally arrived here with
nothing more than the shirts on their back. I mean, they have nothing. And after a generation and a half, they've got thriving businesses, careers, industries, etc. If we're so awful, then how does that happen?
Miami is a classic example. Miami is Cuban Florida. It's where an awful lot of the Cuban exiles wound up. And they, as you say, they are doing extremely well. Having come here with absolutely nothing.
Yeah, if we had a legitimate media, which we don't, the race peddlers would be called the carpet, but we don't. So the argument continues.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right, Arkeith.
So have a good evening.
I'll do the best that I can, Arkeith. I got a WhatsApp here a little while ago talking about professional basketball players. 70% of professional basketball players are black. And I pointed out the systemic racism that forces them into professional basketball to make millions of dollars a year. And the WhatsApp says, and they never complain about income inequities. I think that's really admirable. Okay, so I got another Joe on the line. Probably wants to talk about CRT, critical race theory. Go ahead, another Joe. Go for it.
You have people who appreciate the opportunities in the U.S., and so they make the best of it. And it becomes an issue of the liberals brainwashing the younger generations that all this stuff is more important than the American dream, and having it's a level playing field. I don't know what else to say other than the universities. There needs to be a focus on the universities, and look at what exactly the professors are teaching, because that's what they're doing. They're indoctrinating the younger generation. They're selling them an ideology, and I think when they first here on Guam, when they first started offering higher education, I don't think that they sold it with the idea of, hey, you're going to be turning against your own families. I think the idea was to help out our families here on island, but with this, the critical race theory has become the dominant theme, and it's either you're part of this team or you don't have opportunities. So, and they're focusing on that. The word is that that's what they're focusing on, instead of evacuating our people in Afghanistan. So, in this next election, which real soon they should be starting the campaigning, if the Republicans don't start bringing up how they're distracted by the wrong ideology and the wrong things to focus on, it'll be really disappointing, Uncle Bob. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you got a good point there, another Joe.
So that's pretty much all I wanted to say, and thanks for your time. I'll keep listening.
All right, good talking to you again, another Joe. So Bruce Densman posts, and he says, I attended a Zoom meeting the other day with Guam Association of Realtors Governance Task Force, and they opened with inclusion and diversity in the real estate community.
On Guam?
Yeah. I looked at the screen, and I was the only old white guy. I am a minority here. That's interesting.
Talking points.
Yeah. See, there's a response here somewhere. Well, let me go back here and read a little bit more from this article about what's happening to the medical profession. Efforts to improve health outcomes for black patients are advancing on many fronts. They include a Boston hospital pilot project to offer preferential admissions to non-white patients for heart care, prioritizing non-whites for Wuhan virus vaccinations, and changing of a United States medical licensing examination test from a graded score to pass-fail.
Dead or alive.
Well, yeah, you could say that's the profession, dead or alive, to help minority students succeed. The Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education is adding a diversity requirement for accrediting U.S. residency and fellowship programs for newly minted doctors, and Northwestern University and its Feinberg School of Medicine are seeking to improve diversity by eliminating a 6-decade-old honors program in medical education. You wouldn't want anything like that. No. Medical schools are adding units on critical race theory, intersectionality, implicit bias, identity, oppression, allyship, power, and privilege to their curricula. Medical students are learning about medical exploitation and medical experimentation on enslaved blacks, black prisoners, and other unwitting subjects. You know, I read that Whitey Bulger, you know, who was not black, certainly, right, volunteered for medical experiments when he was in Alcatraz. He got a little bit of time whacked off his sentence because of it. Let's see. And staple reading assignments in med schools feature such non-medical polemics as Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility and Ibrahim X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. So we don't want people that are in medical school studying to be forget about anatomy. No. You don't need anatomy. Chemistry, pharmacy. No. Anti-racism. That's where the real action is. This year alone, 6 state medical boards have added a requirement for training in anti-racism, implicit bias, or cultural competency for doctors in some practice areas to be eligible for a medical license. Wow. Raising the total to 13 jurisdictions that require such training. 8 other boards are reviewing such proposals, according to the Federation of State Medical Boards. We're really in for a rough time in the United States, and there doesn't seem to be any force strong enough to stop this. So, you know, you may go to a doctor. I can imagine a conversation like this. I understand that your cousin was really sick and he went to the doctor the other day. How did it work out? Oh, it came out really well. So your cousin's okay? No, he died. But the clinic was really high on diversity and inclusion. So we feel pretty good about my cousin. Okay, so we got the most dangerous man on the internet on the phone here. And he wants to talk about eugenics. Go ahead, R. Carl.
Hey, Bob. Yeah, among Thomas Sowell's many writings is a thick book called Intellectuals and Society, of which I've read just a fraction. But in it, there's a section on that he carved out into a smaller book that directs its attention towards race, and it's a much shorter book, and it's I think a good read. It's called Intellectuals and Race, and he talks about that the first half of the 20th century, topics like this eugenics and cleansing of the race, and things like that. That was actually a very strong view of the left. Margaret Sanger, who started Planned Parenthood, was big on eugenics, and she was definitely a leftist. They believe very much in the perfecting of the human race by allowing.
Hey, Carl.
Yeah.
Sorry, but we're out of time. This is really interesting. We can talk about this tomorrow. Margaret Sanger, abortion, race, and who she saw as her best customers.
All right.
Thanks for calling, Carl.
Looking forward to it. Bye-bye.
Okay, another exciting episode of Tall Tales comes to an end. Have no fear, we'll be back tomorrow with more Tall Tales. We'll see you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The deadline is met. U.S. troops are out of Afghanistan. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The country's longest war is over, but the U.S. left at least 100 Americans who wanted out behind, as well as tens of thousands of Afghan allies.
As the hour approached midnight in Kabul, the last manned U.S. aircraft, the C-17, took off from the airport, ending a 2-week-long airlift evacuation and the longest war in American history.
It's a mission that brought Osama bin Laden to a just end, along with many of his al-Qaeda co-conspirators. And it was not a cheap mission.
General Kenneth McKenzie, the head of U.S. Central Command, paid tribute to the more than 2,400 American service members killed, including 13 who died in a terror attack last week. President Biden is scheduled to address the mission's end this afternoon.
Fox's Jared Halpern. National Guard troops from several states respond to hard-hit areas of Louisiana, where Hurricane Ida caused massive damage and flooding. The system, now a tropical depression, is heading for Tennessee. Gail Jones Carson of Memphis Light, Gas, and Water says Ida's remnants may cause problems there.
We have 20 crews. We have 50 contract tree trimming crews. And we also have 6 outside contract crews that are here right now, ready to go to work.
The storm left at least 2 dead, and a 71-year-old Louisiana man is missing and feared dead after an alligator attacked him in Hurricane Ida floodwaters. And California's Caldor Fire forces thousands to evacuate the tourist town of South Lake Tahoe. Tom Porter is chief of CAL FIRE.
We haven't had fires burn from one side of the Sierras to the other. We did with the Dixie, now we have with the Caldor.
America's listening to Fox News.